In the silence between ruins, in the shadows of temples long abandoned, there lies a ledger that no hand has ever written. It is not made of stone, nor clay, nor ink. It is a book invisible, and yet all civilizations knew of it. We call it today the mystic debt. Debts not counted in coins, but in offerings. Not measured in gold, but in blood, in prayers, in promises whispered to the unseen. Every empire, every kingdom, every tribe believed they owed something to the gods, to the earth, to time itself. And if that debt went unpaid, the price was ruin. Tonight, I will take you through that ledger, page by page, civilization by civilization, from the deserts of Egypt, where kings fed gods with incense and bread, to the jungles of Mesoamerica, where warriors fought wars not for conquest, but for sacrifice, from Mesopotamia, where priests climbed ziggurats to balance the heavens, to Rome, where emperors built monuments not only for glory, but to appease fate itself. And as we wander, you may begin to ask, what debt remain unpaid in our own time? But first, what is this debt? What is this unseen currency? Ancient peoples believed life itself was borrowed, that the sun rose each day, not by chance, but because it was fed. Fed by ritual, fed by blood, fed by sacrifice. The world, they thought, was not given freely, it was loaned, and loans must be repaid. This is the first page of the ledger. Consider the Aztecs, great builders, fierce warriors, dreamers of blood and sun. They waged wars not to conquer territory, not to seize wealth, but to capture prisoners. These were called the Xochiyautu, the flower wars. But there was no beauty in their flowers. Their blossoms were hearts still beating, their petals blood streaming down temple steps. For the Aztec believed if the gods were not nourished, the sun itself would falter. The world would end in eternal darkness. This was their debt, a daily payment to the gods who carried the sky, a grim ledger where every sunrise demanded blood.
Travel now to Egypt. The Nile flows eternal, and yet the people knew it could betray them. A flood too small, a flood too great. To guard against chaos, the pharaohs paid their debts. Every dawn, priests entered temples, bringing bread, beer, incense, and song, not for the people, but for the gods themselves. For the gods, it was believed, could starve. If left unfed, they would abandon Egypt. So the offerings continued, day after day, century after century, not out of charity, but obligation. The unseen tax of existence, the rent for living in a world maintained by divine hands. In India, the Vedic sages spoke of Rita, the cosmic order. Rita was not a god, nor a law, but the rhythm of the universe itself. To break Rita was to invite disaster. And so offerings were made, fires kept burning, hymns recited. These were not acts of devotion alone, but of repayment. For to be born, to breathe, to eat, to drink, was to incur debt to the cosmos, a debt that only ritual could balance. Across the world, across cultures separated by oceans and centuries, this belief echoed, that life was not free, that existence itself was borrowed, that the unseen ledger demanded payment. Some gave prayers, some gave monuments, some gave blood. But all agreed the debt was real. And this is the mystery we follow. In the next chapter of our journey, we will walk deeper into history's temples. We will climb the ziggurats of Mesopotamia, trace the bloodlines of the Maya, and stand in Rome's great arenas of stone to witness how civilizations carried their debts. The ledger is long, its ink is sacrifice, and its pages are written in the rise and fall of empires.
Mesopotamia, debts written in clay and stars. Before Rome's marble, before Egypt's stone, there was Mesopotamia, the land between rivers, cradle of civilization, and the first home of the ledger. Here, kings and priests raised towers of mud and brick, ziggurats that pierced the sky, not homes, not palaces, but stairways of debt. Each step, each level was a payment, a bridge between man and God. The priests ascended daily, bearing bread, oil, wine, and blood. These were not gifts, they were installments, payments toward the balance of the cosmos. For in Mesopotamia, the gods were not benevolent, they were creditors, demanding, relentless, eternal. The great flood that drowned the world in the Epic of Gilgamesh was seen as divine collection. Humanity had failed to pay, and the waters were the price. Think of it. Every harvest, every newborn child, every breath of air was considered borrowed. The people did not own their lives, they leased them, and the rent was sacrifice. The debt was cosmic. To refuse it was to invite famine, plague, chaos. And so the ziggurats rose higher, each brick a prayer, each offering a receipt written not in ink, but in blood. The Maya, blood for the sun. Cross the oceans, and time itself bends. We enter the jungles of Mesoamerica. The temples stand sharp against the canopy. The calendars, circles within circles, mark not just time, but obligation. The Maya did not see history as a straight line. They saw it as a wheel. Each turn demanded renewal. Each cycle demanded repayment. For the universe itself was fragile. The sun, they believed, was not guaranteed. It rose only because it was nourished by blood, by life, by the pulsing essence of the human heart. And so kings opened their veins, piercing tongues, ears, even genitals. Ropes of thorns pulled through flesh, a personal sacrifice. But more often, it was others who paid. Captives, slaves, enemies taken in war. They were offered on the altars of stone, their blood flowing down steps that still run red in memory. The Mayan calendar, complex and precise, was not only a map of time, it was an invoice. Each Baktun, each cycle, reminded them the debt is due, the gods must be fed, the wheel must turn. And when it did not, when rituals were neglected, or when drought came, their cities began to wither, as though the debt had been called in.
Rome, the pact with fate. Now journey west, to Rome, not the Rome of ruin, but of triumph. Marble shining, legions marching, eagles held high. Rome believed itself eternal. Yet even Rome carried debts, for the Romans feared not just their gods, but fate itself. They called it Pax Deorum, the peace of the gods, a fragile treaty between mortals and the divine. As long as Rome upheld its duties, sacrifices, festivals, and auguries, the empire would prosper. But if neglected, disaster would follow. And so every victory, every conquest, every rise of power was paid for in blood. At the Colosseum, tens of thousands were slaughtered. Some as entertainment, yes, but also as offering, a transaction written in death. And in marble too, the payments were made. Aqueducts, temples, roads, monuments not only to emperors, but to the gods who watched. Rome's debt was not only spiritual, it was civic. a pact with its people, its ancestors, and the unseen threads of destiny. And when Rome grew careless, when corruption spread, when rituals faded into mere performance, some whispered that the gods had turned away, the debts had gone unpaid, and the empire began to crumble.
Echoes across time. Mesopotamia, the Maya, Rome. 3 worlds, 3 cultures, 3 visions of the unseen. And yet all believed the same thing, that no civilization is free, that survival is not a gift, that life itself is a loan, written in an invisible ledger, and that every nation, every king, every person must pay their share. Some paid in offerings, some in monuments, some in blood. But all understood, when the balance tips, when the debt is ignored, collapse follows. This is the law that outlives empires, the debt that never dies. And so we have seen how the ancients honored their obligations, but what if they failed? What if the gods were not paid, the ancestors forgotten, the balance broken? In the next chapter, we will wander among ruins and legends. Atlantis swallowed by the sea, the Maya abandoned to drought, islands stripped bare by human hunger. Were these collapses accidents of history, or were they the final collection notices of the mystic debt?
The price of refusal. Every debt must be paid. This is the first law of the unseen ledger. But what happens when the offering stops? When the temples fall silent? When the gods grow hungry? When the balance is broken? Civilizations believed they knew the answer. The price was catastrophe. The punishment was collapse. Atlantis, a debt of hubris. There is a story, whispered from the pens of Plato, a city of gold and marble, of wisdom and power, a place beyond all others, Atlantis. The Atlanteans grew mighty. They built great palaces, sailed vast seas, and bent the world to their will. But they forgot the ledger. They forgot the law of balance. Greed replaced gratitude. Pride replaced piety. The offerings ceased. And so the sea rose. In a single night, Atlantis was swallowed, its towers pulled beneath the waves. Was it only myth, or was it memory, a warning carved into story of a debt unpaid?
The Maya collapse, the debt of drought. Far from Atlantis, in the jungles of the Maya, cities rose like stone mountains. Temples, plazas, pyramids, all aligned with the stars. But then, silence. The cities emptied. The jungles reclaimed the stones. What happened? Some say drought. The rains failed, crops withered, famine spread. But to the Maya, this was not mere weather. It was collection. The gods, perhaps, had not been fed enough. The cycles of sacrifice were broken. The cosmic wheel turned against them. The debt of blood had come due, and the people vanished into history's shadows. Easter Island, the debt to the earth. Across the sea, on a lonely island, stood giants of stone, the Moai, silent faces, staring toward the horizon. The people of Rapa Nui built them as offerings, as payments to ancestors and spirits. But in doing so, they cut the forests, hunted the birds, emptied the land. And when the last tree fell, the island withered. No boats, no crops, no escape. The debt was not only to gods, but to the earth itself. And when the earth was exhausted, it collected its due, with silence, with famine, with despair.
The law of collapse. Atlantis, the Maya, Rapa Nui. Different worlds, different ages, but bound by the same truth. When the debt is ignored, when the offerings cease, when greed or neglect outweighs balance, civilizations fall. The mystic debt is patient. It waits, but it never forgets. And when the final notice comes due, there is no bargaining, no escape, only ruin.
But if collapse is the cost of refusal, what then of us? Have we too been borrowing? Are our towers and machines built on debts unseen? Do we owe to the earth, to the future, to the very balance of time itself? In the next chapter, we will step away from the ruins of the past and look into the mirror of the present to ask, are we the new Atlantis?
The mirror of the present. We have walked through temples and ruins. We have seen the debts of gods and kings. But now the question rises like smoke. What of us? What debts do we carry? For though we no longer bow to ziggurats, though our calendars no longer demand blood, though our emperors do not sacrifice in marble halls, the ledger still waits, unseen, unforgiving, alive. The debt to nature. Look to our world today. Skyscrapers pierce the clouds where once towers of brick and stone stood. Engines roar where priests once sang. But beneath the steel and glass, the same bargain remains. The ancients owed to gods. We owe to nature. Each tree cut without care, each river poisoned, each sky darkened with smoke. These are withdrawals against a balance we do not own. And though the earth is patient, she too will collect. Storms stronger, seas rising, fields turning to dust. These are not accidents. They are invoices. The old debts were paid in offerings. The new debt may be paid in collapse.
The debt to future generations. But the earth is not our only creditor. There are others who wait, unseen, those yet unborn. Our children, our grandchildren, the silent millions who will walk after us. What will they inherit? A world rich, balanced, alive? Or a world stripped bare, where the sun burns too hot and the seas creep too high? To them, we owe more than monuments. We owe a livable future. The ancients built pyramids, statues, ziggurats as payments to gods. What will we build for them? And will it be enough? The debt of balance. There is another debt, quieter, but no less real. The debt of justice. For where imbalance grows, between rich and poor, powerful and powerless, nations and nations, there is an unseen weight. Call it karma, call it consequence, call it the law of balance. When societies tip too far, when one side grows heavy with greed and the other hollow with hunger, the scale breaks. Revolutions ignite, systems collapse. The balance demands restoration. This too is mystic debt, written not to gods, but to humanity itself.
Are we the new Atlantis? So I ask you now, are we any different from the Maya, from Rome, from Atlantis? They thought themselves eternal. So do we. They built towers to scrape the sky. So do we. They believed their debts could be ignored. So do we. And yet, their cities are ruins. Their voices only echoes. Their debts unpaid. Are we next in line? The ancients carried their debts to gods, to cycles, to fate. We carry ours to earth, to future generations, to the fragile balance of life. The question is not whether the ledger exists, it is whether we see it in time. For the book is open, the ink is still wet, and every act we take, every choice we make, is written upon its pages.
The path of reconciliation. If there is a debt, can it be repaid? The ancients believed so. They did not only fear collapse, they sought balance. They built, they offered, they sacrificed, not only to survive, but to restore harmony. And perhaps in their actions, we find a map for our own. Rituals of renewal.
In Egypt, priests rose with the sun, offering bread, beer, incense, not once, but every day. They knew the gods must be fed, and so they paid in devotion, not in neglect. Among the Maya, great calendars turned, not only to mark time, but to renew it. With each cycle, rituals restored the balance so the world might continue. The Romans, too, built their aqueducts, their amphitheaters, their temples, not only for power, but to prove to gods and people alike that order was maintained. Ritual, sacrifice, monument. These were payments written in stone and song. Our own offerings. And what of us? We no longer sacrifice on temple steps. We no longer feed idols with bread or blood. But perhaps the offerings are still required. Only now the gods are different. The temple is the earth, and the altar is the future. What offerings shall we bring? Clean air, living rivers, forests that rise again. Perhaps our monuments must not be of stone, but of sustainability. Cities that breathe with nature, energy drawn from sun and wind, lives lived with balance. These are our sacrifices, not of bodies, but of greed, not of blood, but of excess.
Learning the language of balance. The mystic debt cannot be escaped, but it can be honored. To live not as masters, but as stewards. To build not for conquest, but for continuity. To remember that every gift, air, water, earth, life, is borrowed, not owned. The ancients whispered of this truth through ritual and myth. We too must whisper it forward to those yet to come. So, traveler, we have walked together through ruins and rivers, temples and tombs, legends and warnings. We have seen debts written in blood and stone, in drought and collapse, in silence and survival. And now we return to the beginning, to the unseen ledger, to the book with no pages and no end. It waits, still open. It waits for us. And as we write our own line upon it, we must ask, will ours be a debt ignored, to be collected in storm and ruin? Or will it be a debt honored, with balance, with wisdom, with care? The choice, as it has always been, is ours. The debt is eternal, but so too is the chance to pay it.
And so, seeker of hidden truths, our journey through the ledger ends here. But there are more pages yet to be turned, more mysteries waiting in the shadows. If you would walk further, if you would listen again when the ancient voices call, then remain with us. Subscribe so that the next story will find you, like the whisper of the past carried on the wind. For the debt of knowledge is never fully paid, and the journey is only beginning.